Once upon a time, Star Wars could do no wrong. Every movie, every game, fans lined up, excited for the next adventure in that galaxy far, far away. But today, things are different. The latest entry, Star Wars Outlaws, launched with high hopes and crashed harder than the Millennium Falcon on a bad day. Released just a month ago, Outlaws promised an open-world Star Wars experience like never before, but instead, it's left fans frustrated and Ubisoft scrambling for answers. Before we get started, if you're new to the channel and enjoying the content, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Bugs, broken missions, and a lackluster experience all played a part in this game's downfall. But the real twist? Ubisoft CEO blames the fans for setting unrealistic expectations as if wanting a game that actually works is too much to ask. The truth is, Outlaws failed for reasons that go much deeper, and it's more than just technical glitches. It's about a broken connection between fans and a franchise that's lost its spark. But how did it come to this? And what does this mean for the future of Star Wars games? Stay with me as we uncover the rise and predictable fall of Star Wars Outlaws. If I had a nickel for every time Star Wars let us down, I could probably buy the franchise back from Disney myself. In this era of entertainment, high-budget failures have become the norm, whether we're talking about movies that lose hundreds of millions or video games that flop despite massive investments. Costs are skyrocketing, yet fewer and fewer projects manage to turn a profit. The reasons for these failures are all over the place. Take Concorde, for example. It failed for so many reasons, but let's save that disaster for another day. Today, we're focusing on Star Wars Outlaws, the newest letdown in the Star Wars universe. Released just a month ago, Outlaws was expected to wow fans, but instead it left most people feeling underwhelmed. And like many of its predecessors, it's another Star Wars product that simply didn't deliver. Now here's where it gets interesting. Some are saying the real reason Outlaws failed is you. Yes, according to certain executives, the blame lies with the gamers, the fans, the community. But hold on, don't worry, this isn't going to be some woke lecture. I'm not here to blame the audience. In fact, I'm with you. The real problem isn't the players, it's the stupidity behind decisions like this. Let's be honest, Outlaws was a disaster long before it reached our consoles. And yet, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot had the audacity to claim that the game's poor performance was due to extraordinary expectations from gamers. Really? Extraordinary? Come on, we're not asking for miracles here. All we want is a game that actually works, but apparently that's asking too much these days. At $70 a pop, you'd expect a functioning game, not one riddled with bugs. Yet, Outlaws managed to disappoint on every level. Players got stuck mid-air during chases, NPCs vanished in the middle of important missions, and don't even get me started on the crashes. It's like the game just gave up right when things were getting good, booting you back to the home screen. It was like watching a bad comedy, except no one was laughing. So just how bad is Outlaws doing? Let's just say it's even worse than expected. In its first month, the game barely sold 1 million copies, a tragic figure for such a high-profile release. For a game like Star Wars Outlaws, selling just 1 million copies in its first month is nothing short of a disaster. When you compare this to Ubisoft's earlier hits like Assassin's Creed Mirage, which sold an impressive 5 million copies in the same period, the contrast is stark. Outlaws' underperformance has sparked serious questions not just about Ubisoft's future with this franchise, but about the direction of Star Wars games as a whole. And let's be clear, this issue isn't affecting all licensed games. Spider-Man titles, for example, are absolutely thriving. But if we're talking about Star Wars, it's a different story. To really understand just how much Outlaws missed the mark, we need to dig into the numbers. Ubisoft initially set high expectations for the game, aiming for 7.5 million units sold by March 2025, according to reports from JP Morgan. However, as the game's sales have stalled, this projection has been downgraded to 5.5 million units. And honestly, if Outlaws somehow reaches 5.5 million, I'll eat a Wookiee on stream. The fact that after a full month on the market, it's only managed to move 1 million copies worldwide is a massive red flag. It becomes even more embarrassing when you look at smaller, lesser-known titles like Lies of P, a game from an indie studio in Korea that sold similar numbers in the same time frame. When a low-budget game from an independent studio can match the sales of a Star Wars title, it's a clear indication that something is deeply wrong within Ubisoft and that the Star Wars name isn't carrying the weight it used to. One of the most glaring reasons for this frosty reception was the technical mess that plagued Outlaws right out of the gate. From the moment it launched, social media lit up with players sharing clips of the game's many bugs, which quickly ruined its reputation. And while Ubisoft did scramble to release patches and fix the most glaring issues, the damage had already been done. For many potential buyers, the excitement evaporated and they were left hesitant to give Outlaws a shot. Honestly though, there wasn't much excitement to begin with, let's call it what it is, but hey, I'm trying to stay objective here. What made matters worse is the growing fatigue players feel toward Ubisoft's formulaic approach to open-world games. For nearly a decade, gamers have been wandering through enormous yet strangely empty open worlds from Ubisoft, and it seems like this familiar formula is wearing thin. The moment players realized Outlaws was yet another rinse and repeat experience, many turned away. Star Wars Outlaws, despite being set in a galaxy that once stirred the imaginations of millions, fell into a trap that has plagued Ubisoft for years. It felt too familiar, too predictable. Fans of the Star Wars universe once expected innovative gameplay and creative storytelling to match the rich lore of the galaxy far, far away. Instead, what they got was a repetitive, uninspired experience that mirrored the frustrations of the newer Star Wars films. In a franchise where novelty used to be the standard, this formulaic approach simply wasn't enough to satisfy the fanbase. One area that compounded the game's issues was Ubisoft's marketing strategy. Early on, the game's debut trailer ignited a spark of excitement, with fans eager to explore a vast, open-world Star Wars adventure. But as the release date drew closer, that initial buzz seemed to fizzle out. New trailers were underwhelming, and there was a noticeable lack of compelling gameplay footage that might have kept the hype alive. With no consistent excitement leading up to launch, the game started to feel like just another entry in Ubisoft's lengthy list of open-world titles. Another significant factor in Outlaws' failure was its lack of presence on major streaming platforms. You'd expect a Star Wars game to make a splash on Twitch or YouTube, with streamers showcasing gameplay to build anticipation. But the game's absence from these platforms was noticeable. This misstep only added to the growing disinterest, as the game failed to make the rounds where potential players could have discovered it. And if we're being honest, part of the problem is Star Wars itself. Let's face it, Star Wars isn't the powerhouse it once was. The decline of the franchise has been well documented, and yes, some might even say I'm personally to blame for calling it out. But in reality, the downfall is rooted in a series of creative missteps, oversaturation, and let's be blunt, terrible projects. The sequel trilogy, in particular, left a sour taste in the mouths of many longtime fans, with its inconsistent storytelling and questionable character arcs driving a wedge into the fanbase. Instead of nurturing the magic that once made Star Wars so special, Disney and Lucasfilm bombarded fans with spin-off films, TV shows, and an avalanche of merchandise. What was once a beloved space opera had become a bloated commercial machine. Fans grew tired of the political agendas woven into the new content and lackluster narratives that fell far short of the original saga's charm. Disillusionment set in, spilling over into every corner of the franchise. The same audience Disney hoped would flock to new Star Wars projects, the so-called phantom demographic, just wasn't there for Outlaws. Who knew, right? It turns out that the disenchanted fanbase Disney seemed to alienate over the years wasn't buying games either. This lack of enthusiasm certainly played a role in Outlaws' poor reception. Even before the game hit shelves, interest was dwindling, and after its release, the response was a predictable mix of surprise, disappointment, and concern. Many die-hard Star Wars fans were shocked by the abysmal sales figures, but let's not forget, some of those fans are the very social media warriors who scream for change but never actually buy anything. And when you've got a vocal group that's all talk but no action, it's tough to pinpoint who to blame. So what does all this mean for the future of Star Wars? Will we see a renaissance, or are we watching the slow demise of one of the most beloved franchises in history? As Star Wars Outlaws fades from memory, it's clear that the franchise must rethink its strategy moving forward. For it to survive, it needs to find a way to reconnect with the core values that made Star Wars special in the first place. The journey of Star Wars Outlaws serves as a cautionary tale not just for Ubisoft, but for the entire gaming industry. Fans are hungry for innovation, creativity, and authenticity, and if franchises fail to deliver, they risk alienating their core audience. With the rise and fall of Star Wars Outlaws, the future of the galaxy far, far away is uncertain. Will it rise again, or is this the beginning of the end for Star Wars? The choice lies in the hands of those who create and nurture the stories we love. Let's hope they make the right decision this time. As we wrap up, it's clear that the rise and fall of Star Wars Outlaws isn't just about one game, it's a reflection of the larger challenges facing the Star Wars franchise. If we want to see a revival, we must demand innovation, creativity, and a return to the storytelling that made Star Wars a beloved universe. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon for more insights on the world of entertainment.